All right, welcome back to this segment. I just want to talk about some of the breaking news that just broke about an hour before I'm recording this, which is that Democrats have won control of the United States Senate once again. Just as a reminder, inflation is on the rise, about around 8%. Inflation is right about 8% right now, year on year. Biden is polling at about 41, 44% approval rating. There's concerns about high rates of crime and border communities being overwhelmed. And despite all that, Democrats have won control of the Senate once again. Catherine Cortez Masto is projected to hold on tonight in Nevada. Just last night, Mark Kelly was projected to win in Arizona. And that's it. House control remains still up for grabs. I think Republicans are still favored, although as the possibilities keep narrowing as more votes are counted, I think the path for Democrats gets narrower and narrower, although it is still technically open. But I think that there needs to be some questions about how Republicans let this happen. This was supposed to be a red wave, and that did not happen. Democrats might end up gaining a seat in the Senate. This is unlike 2018 when the Senate map was so skewed against Democrats that it was a miracle that they didn't lose more seats than they did. But this time it was a fairly even map and a fairly competitive map. And yet Democrats managed to gain seats anyway. And that actually puts them in a good position going into 2024 because that map is going to once again be brutal for Democrats. And my expectation right now is that Democrats are probably going to lose 3 Senate seats and Republicans are going to get Senate control in 2024. But what's happened as a result of this is that, and this I guess also depend on how the Georgia runoff goes. Republicans are not going to be able to get to a 60-seat majority as many expected. And so question is, who's to blame? I'm not sure, honestly. Donald Trump is certainly a factor, but Mitch McConnell and Rick Scott were certainly the ones running the campaign. And, Rick Scott in particular, from what I heard, was the one who sort of tried to recruit some of these guys like Blake Masters in Arizona, Adam Laxalt in Nevada, who was slightly better candidate. Still had his share of issues, though, but certainly not like Blake Masters did. Blake Masters, I think, ran one of, if not the worst, Senate campaigns of this cycle. And yeah, as well as Don Bolduc in New Hampshire, who lost in spectacular fashion there. J.D. Vance, who was dragged over the finish line by the partisanship and forced Republicans to spend money there. There's a lot of blame to go around, in my opinion, but I think my friend Eric Cunningham, I think, put it nicely on Twitter, saying that Republicans' number one job next year is to make sure that Peter Thiel's chosen candidates lose their primaries. Seriously, this was a disaster for them. And not only are Republicans losing winnable races, they are underperforming even Donald Trump. Like, how in the world do you do that? And there's also been some calls in Nevada, like, for example, Nevada, like other competitive states, Secretary of State, election denier Secretary of State candidates went 0 for 5 in the competitive states, including in Nevada. But at the same time, Nevada did elect a Republican governor. From what I can tell, he seems like a fairly moderate guy. His focus is on local issues, including tackling crime in Las Vegas. That's an issue that spoke to voters. So, like I said, this sort of speaks to the theme that I was talking about last time about sanity prevailing. Moderation prevailing, not maybe, and just voters saying enough with the games and with the extreme rhetoric and with all of that. Like, just get back to work for us. And Republicans, he, as a result of this of this election, hopefully will probably turn away from some of the more divisive figures like Donald Trump. Maybe they'll consider even replacing Rick Scott in the Senate conference chair, considering that he failed to get the Republicans their promised majority. But it's also interesting looking like, regardless of what happens in the House, I think Republicans, are still the narrowest of favorites. But Kevin McCarthy doesn't look like he has the votes to be Speaker of the House. And that's an interesting development that's happened over the past few days. I've heard many Republican congressmen saying that they want someone besides Kevin McCarthy to do Speaker. Now, who that ends up being, I'm not sure. People have talked about Elise Stefanik maybe becoming Speaker. Steve Scalise, I think, maybe might be a better candidate, but I'm not sure. And people have actually talked about someone who is about to leave the House, but because the Speaker of the House doesn't technically need to be a member of the House, people have talked about maybe someone like Liz Cheney or John Katko maybe being Speaker of the House. Moderate Republicans could strike a deal with the Democratic minority to put a moderate Republican as Speaker of the House over the Republican majority. That would be super funny if that happened. But I think it would please a lot of people, but maybe not everybody. But still, it's unlikely to happen. But anyway, in terms of the fight to move on from Donald Trump, there's been a lot of talk. You've had some Republicans in Virginia that have said they want to move on from Trump. Other talking heads in media want to move on Trump, though notably Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity, from what I hear, are still on board. And so is Elise Stefanik, who is number 3 in the House GOP leadership and is probably going to be House Majority Whip. She's currently House GOP conference chair, but she's still on board with Trump. And my guess is because she just assumed initially that Kari Lake, if she wins the governor's race, is going to be Trump's running mate, considering that she seems to be a totally unrepentant election denier. But now that it looks like the strong possibility now that Kari Lake is actually going to lose. Mark Kelly's already won. Adrian Fontes has already won the Secretary of State race. And now it's looking like governor and attorney general races may actually be called in favor of Democrats next. So with that, Elise Stefanik, I think, is hoping to aim to be Trump's VP pick. And, this is sort of the cynic in me, but it seems like everyone's integrity has their price. And Trump, I think, understands that better than everybody. And so, it's sort of sad to see someone like Elise Stefanik, who had like a great amount of integrity, sort of just abandon principles like this. I don't know. I expected better of her. I used to admire her. I thought she was doing a good job in getting more women in the GOP caucus, but it's sad to see the direction she's taken. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see, considering this coming week that Donald Trump is going to declare his next presidential run, which is honestly the last thing the Republicans need right now. I honestly think it would be a good idea to get a fresh face. And I do expect a fresh face to potentially declare. And not just Ron DeSantis. I think Glenn Youngkin may be a contender. I think Larry Hogan is angling to be a contender. There's a lot of individuals who I think should run for president. And I think that Donald Trump is certainly not one of them. He's a spent force. Like I said in the last episode, he's a spent force. And it's time to put him out to pasture and move on from him. I admire the Republicans who speak out against him, but maybe it's best if we just shut up about him and just pretend he doesn't exist. I mean, I guess we can't do that now because he's probably going to declare, so he's going to suck up everybody's attention. You got to go after him if he's a candidate. But honestly, I never felt more optimistic about Republicans potentially moving on from Donald Trump after a disastrous election like this. The Republicans took a 2-year gamble on thinking that they just went hard on the election denial stuff and just stayed loyal to Trump, that he'd get them through a GOP red wave and gravity would take over. That didn't happen. Republicans managed to defy gravity by running the campaign that they did. And maybe some sense has finally been knocked into them. I'm not sure. I thought the same way after January 6th, though. That clearly didn't look what happened there. Sometimes wonder though, how many elections do Republicans have to lose before it finally gets through their head that they need to dump this guy and they need to move on and probably run someone like of the caliber that they used to run. Maybe not exactly the same, maybe a little bit different, but someone who can define the party in a different image than the one that's been defined the last 6 years. Because honestly, the last 6 years have been ridiculous. And America needs a principled conservative Republican Party. You know, if the Democrats are just running everything, it's not going to be good. Just as it would be good if the Republicans are just running everything. I think we need that counterbalance, and ideally we probably need more parties as well. But we're stuck with the system that we have. So it's in everybody's best interest that the Republican Party snaps out of its Trump fervor and finds its voice again. And maybe that's going to happen now. Certainly with the loss of the Senate, maybe it'll finally wake up and people maybe will choose different leaders and will potentially run a better election in 2 years from now. Because hey, I think a recession's probably coming. Inflation is continuing. Interest rates are rising. Economic times are not going to be easy. So we need an alternative in this country. America does need an alternative in order to present a vision in case Biden's economic agenda just goes down in flames. So, I'd like to see a party that can offer that instead of the craziness that it's been offering the past 6 years. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm feeling probably more optimistic than I have had probably in 6 years. But take that for what that means. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.